So today I'm giving you the Spark Notes version of last week's franchise premiere for MLB The Show 23. And you're probably thinking, that happened last Thursday. Why are you just now bringing this video out? Well, I have a little info that wasn't part of the premiere that's actually going to be in MLB The Show 23. And this info was actually brought to me by Mills, an OG in the community. Go show him love. I'll put his Twitter in the comment section down below. The pinned tweet, it'll be right there for you. He also streams like every day. Go check him out. But he DM'd me this and I was like, ooh, that's pretty cool. That's actually going to be in franchise. I'm going to tell everybody. Well, I had to go get SDS's approval to make sure I could tell you all. They told me that it was okay to do this. So let's talk about it. So with that being said, drop your comments. Were you excited about the stuff that you heard in franchise that's coming? Did you not like it? Did you want more? Do you think this is good enough? Let me know all your thoughts and opinions down below. I'll quickly get it out of the way. I think that the stuff that they implemented this year was awesome. I would rather them take a section of franchise. This year, it seems like they really went heavy on scouting and the draft. And I would rather them put 100% into one aspect of it, give it their all, make sure that it's really well implemented, rather than taking like trades, free agency, contracts, prospects, progression, regression, and only put like 10% effort into all those things. And then it's like kind of half-assed. So like I said, I feel like they really went hard on the scouting and drafting. I hope they do that this year, and then next year maybe fix free agency or whatever else area of franchise they want to work on, and just keep building and building and building until we get that franchise mode that we're looking at. It also seems like they're going to take aspects of like previous years and tweak them to make sure that they're improved as well. So it looks like they're really trying to build this franchise mode up to be the best that it can be. But with that being said, let's get into the good stuff. Let's talk about it. So the first thing they talked about was the postseason format, that the expanded postseason format that should have been in MLB The Show 22, but they didn't want to implement it and just it be, hey, more teams make the postseason. They wanted to make sure that the logic behind everything, the coding, all the behind the scenes stuff that you may not have thought about works properly within the mode, rather than just adding more teams to the postseason. You got to think, with more teams making the postseason, more teams are going to be making trades to make their teams better, to make that playoff push, but also teams are going to look to trade away players because they're not in the postseason. There's also tiebreakers. There's also like minor league stuff, players getting called up and sent down. So essentially all the behind the scenes stuff, they wanted to make sure it was implemented correctly before they implemented the expanded postseason. So that's why we're seeing it now in 23 and not in 22. We're also going to see competitive balance tax being updated, minimum salaries, updated MLB draft schedule, and MLB lottery. So again, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, but it's stuff that should be implemented in franchise to make it more realistic, more immersive, and just kind of feel like real life stuff. They also talked about the Ohtani rule, where the AI wouldn't put Ohtani as a pitcher and a DH on the same day. And also, if you controlled the Angels, you couldn't have Ohtani pitching and hitting in the same day unless you went into the game, took out your DH, and then obviously Ohtani automatically became the DH because he was pitching. So essentially they fixed that, the bug or whatever it was, and it works now. On top of that, the Silver Slugger in the NL was usually the pitcher. Now it's going to be a DH. So that's fixed. Kind of small things, but it needed to be fixed. And this is a big one. They said that player metric, trade logic, and trade metric was the best that it's ever been. And I feel like we hear that every single year, and I'm pretty critical about this. I've probably been the most critical out of anybody. I like to post the bad trades on Twitter and social media and make fun of it all the time. But it's good to hear that they're constantly trying to improve it. So with player and trade metric, essentially what it is it's the player value. It's their contract, their age, their potential, their overall, how they're performing in game. Everything about that player is incorporated into their player value. So they talked about roster tuning, and this is actually important with the player metric, which also known as player value. And it's important because roster tuning was needed. They noticed that certain positions and also certain players were being overvalued more than others. Catchers and relief pitchers were the main ones that were way overvalued. And then specific players that hit their max potential were just like crazy overvalued when they shouldn't have been. But at the same time, they've noticed how the trend in baseball has started to shift to being more offensive focused. So they wanted to make sure that the attributes were weighed a little bit more equally. And when you look at it, previous MLB The Shows, fielding was way too overvalued with player overall. Corey Seager was way undervalued as a shortstop because his hitting stats were good, but his fielding numbers were bad. And even just players that had high fielding attributes were way overvalued. So they tried to equal it a little bit and even kind of push it towards more of an offensive focused MLB. And again, I'm not saying that it's going to be perfect, but it's good to hear that they're trying to mimic what's going on in real life. And they're also making sure that they tweak how attributes are weighed, and also player and their player values are just constantly changing. So again, we'll have to see how MLB The Show 23's trade logic is, but it sounds like the changes are are good. I like to hear that, you know, offense is becoming more important. Fielding attributes aren't as important as they have been in past games. And also at the same time, positions are going to be weighed a little bit differently. We're not going to have, you know, 85 overall reliever being traded for a team's top 3 prospects. And we may see some crazy trades that don't make a lot of sense in the game. And also you got to take into consideration that they use their MLB The Show roster. We usually use rosters from the vault, so those valuations may vary as well. You kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to trade metric and player metric and trade logic as well. Another cool thing that they did mention was market sizes. So it seems like teams kind of have an identity that we don't see anywhere in franchise, but it is kind of behind the scenes. Small market teams act like small market teams, big market teams act like big market teams, but also like things change throughout your franchise. And of course you have the Padres, who really aren't the biggest of market, but they act like they're one of the top teams in baseball, spending crazy money. So it does seem like those things are kind of being implemented, which is cool. But I would also kind of like to see how kind of see that laid out somewhere in franchise, you know, like almost like a goals type thing, or like an identity where it's like, you know, certain expectations are laid out for you. Like, we're a big market team, act like it, spend money, make trades, make the best team possible. We're a small market team, try to build the best team possible while acting like a small market team, find deals, make trades for some under the radar players, you know, kind of things like that. So it'd be cool to see those things implemented in the future, but it's cool to see that there is something like that already in the game. Prospect generation logic was kind of the next big thing that was talked about. What they talked about was how they noticed ages for the prospects in the scouting part of the draft was just not correct. A lot of older players, 23, 24, 25, 26, when in real life, a lot of the players being drafted are like 18 to 22. So they went into that, they completely overhauled it, and they made sure that the draft was mostly 18 to 22 year olds, because those older players, it just doesn't make sense. They even brought out this really cool graph here that shows us that 90% of the players that are going to be in your prospect pool are 18 and 19 year olds. But also these will be the type of prospects that you do see high school seniors, first and second year junior college players, and then you'll have a first year freshman, a 4-year freshman, 4-year sophomore, 4-year junior, 4-year seniors, and then undrafted players. An undrafted player is essentially a player that you or the CPU doesn't draft in the draft, and because of that, what you will see is some of them will appear in a future draft. So say you have an 18-year-old that you scout, you're like, I don't know about them, I'm gonna pass on them, and then they don't get drafted by the CPU either. So maybe in your second or third year of your franchise, they'll pop up again in your scouting reports, which is awesome. I don't really think many sports games have implemented this in a scouting draft aspect of the game. And I think this is really cool to see. So like there'll be a high school player doesn't get drafted. He's like, you know what? I'll go to college for a couple years. Boom, he's back in your draft pool. I think that's really cool. It's a fun little feature. That's a win from MLB The Show. There's also diamond in the rough and bust logic. Remember that, because I will talk to you once we go more into the scouting and draft portion. Injury logic is another thing that we'll talk about once we get more into the actual scouting and draft portion, where you can actually see the player card. And so is fog of war, which I think is a big win by MLB The Show on this one. All right, so now let's get into this. So you're going to see the screen once you hop into a franchise in your scouting portion. And as you can see, you have a scouting budget, which right now it says 24,000. But what they've done is they've dropped it from 4 scouts to 3 scouts, and your scouts aren't assigned to a certain region. So no more East, West, Central, and International. It's just your scout, and they have those 4 categories of attributes. And on top of that, that budget is this is your scouting budget, and that is it. It is not part of your contracts for your MLB players, your free agency signings, anything like that. Just scouting. And of course, they've lowered it to match real life. There are no scouts in real life making millions of dollars like we've seen in MLB The Show 22 and previous MLB The Shows. So what it is you're going to have efficiency, discovery, and then pitchers and position players as the attributes. You want the best scouts that you can afford. Efficiency is how quickly they scout. That's it. Pitchers, how well they scout pitchers. Position players, how well they scout position players. And then discovery, how well they discover new prospects. So like I said, get the 3 best scouts you possibly can. That's the best thing you can do. The next screen you're going to see in the top left corner, it says week 1 of 14. You're also going to see bonus allotment. Bonus allotment is how much you can spend on your draft picks. Yes, you actually have a budget this time where you can only spend this certain amount of money. And you're probably thinking, well, that's easy. Every prospect that we draft only wants 60, 70,000 on their contract. It's actually changing this year, where you're actually going to have to spend varying amounts of money based on where you draft a player, how good they are, things like that. And again, we'll talk about that when we see the player card. It'll make more sense. But like I said, it says week 1 of 14. So at the start of the year to the draft on the All-Star break, it is 14 weeks. And every week you're gonna have a scouting assignment, and that's what these 3 priorities are. So now you don't have to worry about changing your scouting assignments every 1, 2, or 3 days. It's just a weekly schedule. You set it once every Sunday, and that's it. So this screen is really similar to how March to October was, or free agency was in March to October last year, or in MLB The Show 22. And so each priority is weighed differently. Obviously, priority number 1 is more important, 2, and then 3. And what you'll do is you'll assign each scout to a priority. You can assign them to do different things. You can do scout a specific prospect, a specific position, or discover new prospects. And then when you want to discover new prospects, you pick the region and the position. Pretty simple. So then if you discover new prospects in priority number 1, you can see what happens. It says 4 new players discovered per week. And obviously if you drop it to priority number 2, it'll be less than 4. Priority number 3, it'll go down as well. Each priority is weighed differently. So you got to be smart. Are you looking to discover more players? Do you want to just scout through the players that are already in the pool? Things like that. But again, you only have 14 weeks and you assign that every Sunday, which I think is better. It's a lot less stressful that you have to constantly change it every 3 days. And I think this is a good idea. The next screen you see is it shows you every single one of your picks in the top left corner. It says Rangers draft picks. You have the rounds, positional needs. If you have it on auto, the CPU will automatically set your positional needs. If you set it to manual, which I think is gonna be very important this year, I think manually scouting is gonna be so good this year. But positional needs, you can set those yourself. So you can have like, I want a starting pitcher, I want a second baseman. You can pick that. And then of course, positional rankings, where each position ranks within the entire MLB. But let's talk about this screen here. If you hit L1 and R1, it changes your kind of like lists. It'll be a top 100 within the MLB ranking, a top 100 that your scouts rank, and then like unscouted players, scouted players, things like that. So there's like different pages that you can select through. But here, I'm not gonna go through the rest of the stream. I'm just gonna start to break down different aspects of the player cards because this is the really important information about the stream. So as you can see here, you have Andres Moya. It says bonus demand is unknown. Remember when I talked about bonus allotment being a specific amount of money? Those bonus demands are going to be what they're looking for to be paid when you draft them. And that can vary. Some players will want more money. Some players will just want to be drafted higher. And if you draft them higher, you won't have to pay as much. It really depends. It'll vary depending on the type of player. Next up, scouting progress, pretty self-explanatory how well you scout the person. The MLB draft rank is what the other teams within MLB rank him. Your draft rank, where the Texas Rangers in this instant, is what your scouts rank them. And those can be different. Those can be different for each player. Potential is always going to be a range. Same thing with the overall and same thing with the player attributes. And that's where the fog of war comes in. So below me are those team rank and MLB rank. As you can see, there it is. But as you can see, you have the player's name, you have the potential range and the overall range. One thing I will say, they did mention that younger players, the range will be wider because if you think about it, high school players, there's a little bit more of a range that they could end up being because you don't have as many games to scout them. And then older players, the range will get smaller the more you scout them. I think they said that the closest a range will get is within 10 overall points. So like 89 to 99, things like that. But the fog of war kind of aspect of it is that you will only see ranges, and it is from 0 to 99. They got rid of like the real life scale that they use for scouting, which is normally 20 to 80. They felt like 0 to 99 was a little bit easier to kind of figure out. It worked easier for just kind of casual players, and also it kind of helped them with the color coding of everything. So obviously red is pretty well below average. Below average is orange, then it goes to yellow, green, and then blue being well above average. You can kind of see that at the bottom. I just have the YouTube time spot in the way. But as you can see, the range is going to be on the player card. It's color coordinated as well. And the fog of war thing is cool because it's always that range. So it could be within that range, or if you don't have them scouted well, or your scouts aren't that good, it could also be outside of that range. So again, there's that risk and reward that I think is awesome. I think the fog of war is a huge win in this part because like I want there to be some risk and reward within the draft process. There's a huge risk and reward within the draft process in real life. I want that in MLB The Show too. I want there to be like, dang, I drafted this guy, he was really good. Or man, I should have scouted this guy more because I drafted him, he's a bust. Boom, bust logic, diamond in the rough. So I talked about these MLB ranks and team ranks. So the MLB rank is going to be there. Your team rank is also going to be there, or your scouting's ranking of the player. There is a chance that the MLB ranking is like number 3, but after your scouts him, 100%, he may end up being like rank 50. There's a bust, right? You can see that the CPU, like other teams are like, man, this guy's really good, but your scouts are like, this guy's really bad. You may want to avoid him. He's a bust. But also the opposite could happen where like maybe the CPU teams think he's like ranked 47 and your scouts are like, this guy's like the 3rd best prospect in the whole draft. There is your diamond in the rough. So there is some variation that could happen. And that's why it's good to scout these players really well, because those things could happen. And also a little tidbit of information, there may be, I don't want to give up too much because I want to do a scouting video because I think it's going to be really helpful. But depending on where you draft, you may want to avoid players who are projected to be higher in the draft because they're not going to be there if you draft later in the round, if you understand what I'm saying. But we'll get to that more once we make a scouting video when the game comes out. But the diamond in the rough bust logic is going to be there. I think it's a really cool ad. I think the fog of war with the varying ranges is super, super, super cool to be added as well. And it's really cool to have like this color coordinated attribute page. Player interest in signing is going to change throughout the draft depending on how much you scout them. Are they blocked by certain prospects already within your organization? A player may lose interest if you have like a really good prospect in the same position that they play in. Bonus demand is what they're expecting for their bonus. Signing motivation is, do they want to be drafted higher? Do they not care? Do they just want more money? And you can work with that when the contract comes up. Doctor exam. This is a big one. This is where the injury logic comes into play. Obviously, injury risk we've seen in previous MLB The Shows, high, average, low, things like that. The doctor exam will appear in June and it will say opted out, injured, or healthy. Healthy means they're healthy, there's no injury risk. Injured means they're currently injured, and with that, it may end up actually hurting their potential and overall once you draft them. Because if it's a long-term injury, it is like real life. If a player is really injured, it could actually affect them moving forward. So there's another risk within the drafting and scouting process. And then opted out means they didn't take a doctor's exam, and there is that risk that when you draft them, they may end up being injured. Again, another fog of war aspect. If they do opt out though, that means that they have to demand less money on their bonus. So that is something to take into consideration. But again, there is that risk that if he is injured, it may end up really hurting them potential and overall wise. So here we go. We have the discover new players in priority number 1. We're scouting a specific player in priority number 2, and then we're scouting another position in priority number 3. One thing they did mention about the draft process is that closers and relievers won't be drafted as high as in previous years. Normally, closers go like top 5 picks, which is not realistic at all. So I wanted to point that out just so you guys know that. I'll also probably mention it again once we actually show the draft. But as you can see, if you put them higher up on your priority list, if you're scouting a specific player, their interest will actually go up per week. So the more you scout them, their interest does go up because they know that you're interested in them. And also the better that your scout is, the quicker that your scouting will go up. As you can see, plus 100% scouting per week. That means you got a good scout. So here we moved up a week. We're in week number 2 now. And as you can see, the Texas Rangers draft rank has actually dropped from 3 to 7, and it's still staying within the 3 rank for MLB. So there is some variation, some disparity between the 2 rankings. And also you can see the secondary position, the doctor exam, like I said, doesn't happen until June, so that's still pending. And then also the potential in the overall will change as well. And you can see how much their bonus demand is. So currently they're looking for around $7.5 million, and your bonus allotment for the Texas Rangers is only at 9.5. So you got to think, is it worth spending this amount of money on your first round pick? Ugh. Especially when you have to pay other picks throughout the rest of the draft. So like I said, R1, L1, recently scouted, recommended draft prospects, top 100 draft prospects from the MLB, and then top 100 draft prospects for your team rank. So like I said, there's different pages that you can go through to kind of figure out who your priority is. And like I said, the rankings will change, your ranges will change as well. Remember, younger players, the range usually stays a little bit wider than older players. And it's just a really cool fog of war aspect. There's a lot of changes that are going on, and I definitely will go more into depth as we get closer to like the release of MLB The Show when I make that scouting video. But right now, I just kind of want to hit you with the Spark Notes, give you a breakdown of what the player card looks like, what it means. And I think these are all really good things added to MLB The Show. This is huge. And now let me tell you about that little secret, that little unknown thing, or that one thing that wasn't talked about in the draft. Generational talents will be in the draft. I'm talking like Mike Trout type players. And it's not going to happen every single draft, and there may be a chance where 1 or even 2 happen in the same draft. But those crazy like high, like we're talking like 70 overall plus players who may end up being like MLB ready within a season, those players can be in your draft. And like I said, it's a very low percentage that it may happen, but it is there. And again, I think this is a huge thing added. We're getting Fog of War, we're getting the overhaul of the prospect ages, the injury logic, the bonus demands, the player attribute ranges, like everything about this, they've completely overhauled it, and they've made scouting just so much better. The diamond in the rough, the bus logic, all things about it, I think is a huge dub. But like I said, generational talents will be in MLB The Show. All right, so once we actually get to the draft screen, your 14 weeks of scouting are over. You're at the All-Star break. Boom. Right before the draft, right before you head into it, you can have like a queue, essentially like a little short list of players that you're interested in drafting. So then you can add those players and then hop into the draft. So the draft lottery is in the game, but there isn't like an actual like scene or anything that shows what happens. It's just like happens. And it says right there, the first 6 picks of the draft have been set via the lottery. So there's that. And then the star will always be next to your team, so you know when you're coming up. As you can see in the top middle part of the screen, there's 10 seconds. The CPU picks will always be 10 seconds, and then your pick is going to be 4 minutes. That time does not stop. You only get 4 minutes. You do not get to pause it. You have to make your pick within 4 minutes. But once you make your pick, it'll stop, and you have as much time you want to adjust your short list, go through any other prospects that you want to look at, and things like that. But once you are on the clock, you only have 4 minutes to make a pick. Again, I think that's pretty cool. Like, I want there to be like, hey, we got to make a pick. Is this the right guy? That risk, that reward. I think it's a good change. When you make a pick, this is going to be the screen that happens, or at the first, I want to say the first 3 or 4 picks. This happens, and then you will also get one for your picks as well, where you kind of get like this little animation, which I think is pretty cool. And then when you draft your pick, boom, that's what you get. So then after you make your pick, you can sim to your next pick or sim the rest of the draft. But like I said, your 4-minute timer for your pick, and then after you make your pick, you have as much time as you want until you can, so that you can arrange anything, change anything, or you can just sim straight to your next pick. So on the screen, it says you lose rights to your draft picks if they are not signed by August 1st. So after you have the draft, you have until August 1st to sign the players, but you can also still scout those players that you drafted. So you still have time to kind of maybe shorten that lower that range a little bit, find out a little bit more if you actually want to spend the money. But also, the more you scout them, that interest may also go up to help you out with some of those bonus demands. So the bonus demand, like I said, was money, but I wanted to point out one of the signing motivations. It says draft position in the bottom left corner. That means they want to be drafted higher than what they're projected to be drafted. You'll also see like money motivated or balance, which means it could go either way. But again, after you go through with the draft, you can go through all of this. You can still scout them. And as you can see, the interest will go up, and you can also scout them some more. Henry Sargent isn't scouted that much at all, 10% over the next 3 days. So then what you want to do is you can't offer a contract until a player has at least 50% interest in you. And then when you go to sign them, you see this range here. You can lowball them. They may or may not sign. You can give them the money that they're looking for. Again, they may or may not sign. What you want to try to do is get the highest interest possible. Overall, these changes that I'm seeing are really cool. Again, you've got to worry about that bonus allotment money. You got to spend within that budget. And I think it's really cool. Here, they ended up lowballing a guy. He turned it down. And after you offer them a contract, you cannot offer them another contract for a few days. You can't just spam them with contracts. And sometimes if you end up lowballing them, their interest in your team will actually go down. So you have to rebuild that interest up. Overall, I've already talked too much. I'm at 36 minutes when the stream was an hour and a half. But the things here look really, really good. I like that there's Fog of War. I like that there's that injury in place that like could end up ruining a prospect, or they could be healthy. I like that players could be motivated by money or getting drafted higher. I like that there is a budget that you have to stay within to sign players. I like that there's the overhaul on the prospect ages. The scouting is completely different. I just like that they took an aspect of franchise that seems to be lacking and just seems to be really cookie cutter for the last 10 years, and they really overhauled it. I think they did a really good job. And like I said, they took this aspect of the mode and they put 100% of their effort into it, and it's a big move. And on top of that, they changed the CBA stuff, which, you know, isn't necessarily a feature to promote, but it is something that needed to be implemented into the game. And then they also took one of the things that we constantly complain about in the trade logic and the player values and stuff like that, and they've tweaked that. So it's awesome to see that they're taking stuff from previous MLB The Shows, working on it, and then also taking a thing that really needed work, and they're doing it. Overall, I'm excited about what's happening with the game. I think they're doing a really good job, and if they continue to take these aspects of the mode that need to be fixed and actually fix them, I think we're going to have a good MLB The Show franchise within the next couple years. Again, let me know what you think about it. Did you like the changes? Are there enough changes? Did you want some more? I know a lot of you want more, but you got to think about, realistically, they have like what, 9 months to actually implement new stuff, because those last few months they're just kind of like testing it all to make sure it works and fine-tuning it. So realistically, you have like 3/4 of a year to actually work on a game. So I think to actually implement something like that, it's awesome. They're adding a lot of cool things. So I'm excited to see what happens. I hope you guys are excited as well. If not, let me know why. If you are excited, also let me know why. Let me know what you want to see in future MLB The Shows for franchise. You know what I'm saying. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thumbs up if you did. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll try to answer them as best I can. That's about it. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.